Alrighty, I'm going to give a little talk about moisture absorbers. Now, there's multiple types of dehumidifiers around. There's one that is essentially, for all intensive purposes, a compressor operated thing. Looks much like an air conditioner. I'm not saying it works exactly like it, but it's fairly similar when you've got a compressor and whatnot. The other kind out there, which fairly slogs a bit of power, they're often 12 volt, but they do take a few amps, are Peltier-based dehumidifiers. These will often have a little tray in the bottom that will fill up with water. Good dehumidifiers actually have a float in them and they turn off when the tray is full so it won't fill up anymore. You have another sort that doesn't have a fan running. So your air conditioning style ones, they have a compressor. They can be fairly noisy-ish, especially when you've got them in a smaller room or in a van or something like that, an RV. Something like that. They make a bit of noise with that compressor. Your so-called whisper quiet ones are often your Peltier-based ones. They have a fan running in them. You'll hear the fan running, but it's fairly quiet. Then you have ones that don't make any noise at all that are called rechargeable. These are indeed silica gel. Then you have non-rechargeable throw-out style like this, and there's actually really two styles of these ones, but there seems to be one that's becoming more common than the rest. I'm not saying it's the only type. There's generally two kinds, but it seems one's becoming more dominant. And yeah, well, the dominant one seems to be the one you throw out and you can't really do much with. You can't regenerate it. Now, the long and short of it is, I have essentially the stuff that both types that don't use a great deal of electricity use. There's your single-use throw-out ones, which can be, but usually are not, silica gel. Silicon dioxide. This container's a bit dirty, but you can see all the little white crystals rolling around in there. Sometimes they're like this, sort of more a crystallized form. Most often they're actually little balls. If you get your so-called rechargeable one, which you can often get a 2-pack, and they'll have a little, often enough they're actually mains powered. I'm not sure. I think there might be 12 volt ones, but I think the majority of them are actually mains powered. And what they actually are is basically just a whole bunch of these. Now, they have a container which, it's like a little plastic box. It looks a little bit like reminds me of the portable radios with the little dimple holes in the front. Behind that they'll have some sort of a plastic mesh, and then right inside it they will have the ball versions of the silica gel, and they should have an aluminium plate in there which will have most likely two thermosistors or some, like a self-regulating thermosistor thingy. It's basically an electronic self-regulating heater. When you first plug it in, they will draw about 100 watts of power, and after they sort of reach temperature, which takes 5 minutes, 7 minutes, once they sort of, it doesn't take too long anyway, once they get up a bit of heat, those watts drop from 100 watts back to about 20 watts. You're supposed to run them for about 12 hours. What it's basically doing is, it's using its self-regulating thermosistor thingies and its aluminium plate, which is effectively what it's heating up, to heat all the silica gel balls inside that plastic case. I am told they get fairly hot too. You can feel the heat coming off them. In the process of that, they dry off those little things. Now, silica gel, silicon dioxide, also known as silica, your general rechargeable one will absorb about 25 mils. It's about a shot glass worth of water. And then you plug it in for 12 hours, preferably in a place that's, like it's got vents in it, like a bathroom or next to an open window or on a veranda, so just to sort of, get all the moisture out, but not in the same place where you're trying to draw the moisture away. You don't want to be using it in a van and then deciding, well, I'm going to, I've got plenty of battery power, I'm going to plug into someone's house or, like a fucking PowerPoint in a trailer park or whatever, and then I'm going to release all that shit straight in to the van again. It's a stupid idea. You need to put it somewhere else. Your disposable ones, most of them, I think originally were silica gel. But it seems most of the ones I've come across are not at all silica gel. They're calcium chloride. Now, these are essentially, well, that's actually the mesh, but they're about that colour. They're that colour. Usually they look, this one started to work, so it's sort of clumped up a bit. But generally they just look like a bunch of white flakes. Almost like plaster of Paris. Not quite, but getting close to that range. The dickheads who designed this one had very small flakes in it. Only because they decided to pack them in a sealed plastic container, and they packed them in so hard they crushed the flakes. Now, I can get, there's throwaway ones like this. This is one of the same brand that's a reusable one. This is Damp Red, which is like a brand name type of one. This is, quite frankly, a friggin' rip-off, because indeed it is the brand name one. I can get fairly cheaply a seriously big sized refill container of these flakes, and in the refill container they're sort of, well, they're not compressed and they're not crunched up. In fact, there's quite a bit of room still in the container. The top 4 inches of the container are empty. In this, however, they put it in a little plastic bag, and they had so much fun trying to jam this little square plastic bag inside this circular container that they crushed them all down to a fucking powder. Not all of them, but too many of them. Now, what effectively you have here is an outer container and an inner container. There is slots in that inner container. The slots in the inner container are so friggin' big, the damn shit was falling through, in which case you can see a couple little bits still in there. So I went and got myself a bit of mesh fabric and stuck it in there to stop bloody 30% of it just going straight through the slots and falling into the bottom. Eventually, all of these eat down and there'll be none left in there, but this will be full of water, but it's actually a mix of water and the calcium chloride. This calcium chloride is used in a number of different applications, including de-icing roads in Japan instead of salt, and as a result, I'm not certain, but I think you're probably not going to face the same sort of corrosion that you would otherwise. Furthermore, they're getting it at a fairly good price because of buying it in astronomical quantities, and so it's not an issue. But that's what they use. There's other different things they use to. I think they use it to keep packaged flowers from building up too much moisture and stuff like that, and keep them fresher so they don't. Yeah, there's a handful of industrial applications. Now, these will take moisture out of a vehicle, no worries. However, so will your silica gel. On a side note, your ones that are rechargeable, that don't have a fan, that have little balls in them, you'll see a few little balls in the front that are coloured. The idea is you're supposed to wait, and after 12 hours those balls will change colour. They have a toxic element added that the colour will change based on the moisture of probably about a half a dozen of these little balls inside a little plastic piece that sits in the front. However, there is several grades of silica gel. One is a low-grade stuff that's essentially looked on as a raw material. The other one is stuff that's, like this, that's sort of used in stuff like that, used for your so-called rechargeable ones that, dry out due to electric heating. There's another one that's not as good, but some people, at least one person, is experimenting with this in their van, and it may well keep moisture low in your van. Now, I think it would be more effective under higher humidity situations, but I really suspect that it's probably not going to do a great job. So you'd need to use this very cheap option, which is basically a low-grade silica gel, with either your rechargeable units, which are a smaller, higher-grade silica gel, or, if you like the idea of throwing money away, these reusable calcium carbonate ones. In effect, you have kitty litter that is silica gel. Now, often it won't quite be the white balls that you're used to. It'll be more like, by the way, these white ball ones, you ever get those silica gel packs in food, like they'll be in, I don't know, lots of different things. Hell, I've even seen them in with boxes and nails. That's this shit. Well, you have a low-grade one that they often seem to be, I don't know why exactly. I don't think it's any toxic element added, but they are, and it's probably something to do with being low quality. They've sort of got like a blue colour to them, or some of the ones in there might be blue. Now that could be deodorant stuff, because sometimes, and I've got a lavender one of these that's a cheaper brand inside my newer vehicle, the 2008 model Ford, actually has little balls in there that are like nice smelling. So some of the odd colours you see in the kitty litter could be like a perfume thing. But the kitty litter ones are a lot bigger, and they often, they won't be a perfect white. They might be a bit blue or have, other bits and pieces in there. And, essentially they just are silica gel, but there might be a few deodorizers and bits and pieces in there as well. But they never seem to be that same perfect white. And the idea is that you can actually get that, and that is really cheap, that stuff. Like, you buy it in big bags, and your bag might be like a £2 bag of the shit. And, I'm not saying it's necessarily £2, but it's, it's a bloody bag that's like a foot wide and about 9 inches tall and probably 4 inches thick. You know, and that'll cost you about $10 US or something like that, you know. So there's people trying to experiment using that as a primary dehydrator, dehumidifier, rather, and trying to use that as their only one. I recommend, yes, do go ahead and use that, but you might also want one of these. Another thing that I have come across, you don't need to buy the rechargeable ones. That's, you know, it's a lot of bullshit to have to buy. They're not necessarily cheap. I've seen them, you know, you probably get them in the States for about $25, sometimes for one, sometimes for a pair. You know, over here it's about $35 for one, or, you know, or $30 for one and $35 for a pair, if you're lucky. You know, they're fucking terrible price. But what you can do, and I've actually even seen it in air compressor systems, believe it or not, when I done my apprenticeship, they had giant silica gel stuff. I doubt it was very high quality, but it might have been. But you can go and get stuff like this. These are actually water-saving crystals that you're supposed to put on the plants, but it's just silica gel. Or you can get some sort of a, you know, especially if you're at work and you end up opening a hell of a lot of packets of nails, you know, because of where you work and you, for whatever reason, you get a lot of silica gel. I suggest getting all those, tearing them all up and keeping them in a glass jar, and either get a used one of these or try to replicate something similar where you got a container that will hold water down low with another container with a couple of things in it. Whether, you know, you might be a smart enough cookie that you can just literally get a container with a lid and put mesh on it. Or you can get, like, and you fill the mesh up with the crystals. Or you can get empty container, one layer of mesh full of crystals, held in place with duct tape or whatever, and then a second piece of mesh over the top held in place with an elastic band. Or something like that, you know, zip tie or so, you know. Bit of an idea for you. I don't really know if you actually need to do that with silica gel. You may well be fine, as those containers are, where it doesn't actually need something to catch water because it doesn't have any water dripping out of it. You may not need that setup at all, because if you consider those little quote-unquote rechargeable ones don't have any water catchment in them, you probably don't need that. You can probably literally just get a jar and either put holes in the lid, find a holes, get a little drill bit, and or even a nail, and just sit the lid upside down and, you know, whack it through to get a bunch of little holes. Or you can just put mesh, if you're a woman and you got some old tights, or you get a bit of, you know, mesh fabric, or even stuff like these polyester shirts that I wear, you know, you can literally just get that and an elastic band over the top, and you might be fine. But instead of going and pissing around, paying big dollars for a stupid fucking heating element inside a shitty little plastic box with a bunch of these balls, you can well get a whole heap of these silica gel packs from stuff at your work, whether it's boxes of nails or whatever the heck you know. If you're at a restaurant, there's likely to be all this sort of shit in some of the food that comes in if you work at a restaurant. Get it all, go and put it in just another friggin' coffee jar or something like that. And I got another idea that's going to save you paying a lot of dollars for a stupid ass little heater. Now, I have up here some very small aluminium pots. And you can get little aluminium pots or you don't even need to get aluminium pots. Let's go full hobo. Let's save ourselves an unnecessary $20+. Just get the silica crystals in a coffee jar. Energy drink can. Tea light candles. And maybe a couple of bits of wire. Something like a brick. You know, like 2 bricks. So you've got a brick this side and a brick that side, just to elevate this enough to put your tea light candle underneath, at which point you get your coffee jar and you slowly empty it all out. Or you may need to make a paper funnel, which is very easy to make. Into one of these, you've cut the top off with some box cutters or whatever. You could go, that'll be good because it's aluminium, it'll transfer heat a lot quicker than using a bean tin, which is steel. And yeah, so there you go. I think that's probably covered most of it. You know, if you go to Daiso, as they call themselves, if you've got that in the States, we've got it over here. It's like a Japanese dollar store. And a lot of oriental stuff and a lot of cleaning products and a lot of little fandangles that women would use and, oh, you name it. I've seen, fuck me drunk, I've seen everything. I've just seen disposable underwear. I've seen giant chopsticks that they somehow use in place of a wooden spoon or something, cooking chopsticks. I've seen a lot of things there. One thing I have seen is basically these, but they're an activated charcoal one. So instead of having your, moisture remover with lavender smell, like I've got in the trunk of my 2008 Ford, you've actually got activated charcoal and moisture remover to remove any of the smells and the water with it. I don't know what the price was. I saw them there, but I didn't take notice of the price. My gosh, it's surprising. It's amazing, really. And that might be another option you want to look into. I have seen a video trying to replicate that. It is fucking nearly impossible. It involves, you can actually, even though these calcium chloride ones are considered disposable, you can regenerate them. Having said that, you might be waiting about 30 hours of very slow heat to regenerate those. But there's another problem. If you heat it incorrectly, heat it wrong, don't deal with it a certain way, I believe the whole lot will bugger up and it'll basically lose its absorbent ability, because if it's dried too fast, they just turn into one big solid hunk of crystal, or they do something where they just turn into a solid hunk and you lose that porousness that you otherwise would have if you heat it, and dry it in less than 30 hours or so. There's some complexity with it, and that's why a lot of them are considered just, sort of throw out. And the basic thing with a lot of these ones is that you're supposed to actually use those until it's just 100% water in there, and then all the calcium chloride is actually in the water, which then complicates things even further, versus your silica gel, which I accidentally was saying you might need one of those style containers, whereas you actually don't. Your silica gel, I remember now, due to the instructions that were written on this thing here, you can put it in established plants. It says make vertical holes, and what you basically got to do is you get this and you mix it with a bunch of water. Yeah, 1 teaspoon of crystals with half a litre of water, so it's about a bit more than a pint. and wait an hour, and then mix that with 5 litres of potting mix. Some potting mixes actually have this in already, but that's sort of, yeah, that's sort of an Australian thing, mixing silica gel in with your potting mix and your plants and all that, because of sort of something that occurred during the 2009 drought. That's sort of become a bit of a fad. And those are left, well, they're actually left from when I planted all the trees at the front of the house out there, the she oaks and a few pines and a bunch of melaleucas. So yeah, I do remember I seen them dealing with this on TV, and you basically, they put water in and it just goes to like a whole heap of big jelly balls basically. So that's what they'll do, as opposed to calcium chloride, which will literally just dissolve into the water. But you're going to get a lot less in your silica gel crystals than you will in your calcium chloride. But the beauty of the silica gel is you can actually regenerate the stuff, whereas calcium chloride, you know, well, theoretically, I haven't found any good explanations that are clear-cut explanations on how to do it without it all turning to shit and losing its absorbing abilities. But anyway, that's my little rant on all of that. Hopefully some of that, you know, help you out. And in due course I may show myself making some, you know, self-rechargeable ones that don't cost me as much, because I'm using an energy drink can and a tea light candle to regenerate it, versus paying money and having to plug it into a power point, you know. And by paying money I mean, you know, there's the price of the silica gel, and then you times it by 5 just to get these shitty little electronics on a bit of blooming aluminium sheet inside a plastic box with little dimples in the side.